showing out, making moves, no doubt. FFA pride, it's what we're all about. From classroom dreams to real world flair, we got the stories you won't find anywhere. Beyond the jacket where the stories unfold, voices of the future, fearless and bold. Tune in now, let the passion ignite. It's more than a jacket, it's a way of life. Beyond the jacket where passion meets purpose.
Welcome back to Beyond the Jacket, where we celebrate the stories that grow beyond the blue corduroy. I'm your host, Paige Cruz, and today we're heading back to the Sunshine State to talk with someone who is as Florida as it gets. Mr. James Sharpe. He's a past Florida FFA state officer turned to agriculture educator. We are so excited to have you on the show today. Why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi, I am also very excited to be here today. I do not think that any opportunity in my lifetime could have topped this experience right here, not even Joe Rogan. So I am just absolutely thrilled to be here.
Well, thank you for coming on. I know I'm super excited for you to be here because some of my FFA journey I got to experience with you and get to know your chapter as well. So this is definitely a close to home episode for me, and hopefully my listeners get to feel that sunshine from Florida, especially if you're listening from where Lacey is today, where it's nice and chilly.
Yeah.
What was your introduction in agriculture, Mr. Sharpe? I know that all my roots are in ag, and that's my background. What's yours?
Well, the economy changed significantly about the time that I came into the picture, but ag kind of skipped a generation in my family. But if you go back even just one generation past my parents, my grandparents were farmers, vegetable farmers in Belglade. And then I have some Kentucky heritage where they did some cattle farming and stuff like that up there as well. But being a sixth generation Floridian, I had to dive back into ag because I was passionate about it. I did not grow up on a farm, and I wasn't a rancher. I grew up in a cow town, Okeechobee. There's a lot of people who wear a cowboy hat that are probably not a cowboy, but there are a lot more who are. And so I grew up around these guys, but I never got the full experience as a youngling. But I am really blessed to have grown up here and got to be a part of it a little bit.
So, do you remember what was the first experience that you had with FFA, or like
Oh,
maybe it
yeah.
was like when you realized when it was more than just the class itself?
Well, that opening and closing ceremonies to a sixth grader kind of seems like a cult ritual, and so that's kind of a shocking and eye-opening moment. But I remember the first time sitting in the Yearling Middle School library where they held the meetings. And when they tapped the gavel and got to business, I was like, wow, they take this very seriously. And so it got my attention for sure. And I had been, talked into being there by my advisor at the time.
I love when the advisor kind of gets you. Jillian Johnston, I'm sure you're familiar with her, and Lacey, she was a state officer the year I came into FFA. And I remember her saying that Mr. Mills, one of the coolest ag teachers you'll ever meet in the state of Florida, kind of voluntold her, if you will, to come be on his OCC team. And that was the start of her FFA career. So it's crazy to see that that's a similar story for some FFA members. And I think each of us have a unique FFA story. So was there a person or maybe an ag teacher for you like Mr. Mills was for Jillian who really set you on your path?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mr. Mills was a shining light in a dark time in my life. Not everybody's childhood is great. And he really looked out for me. He noticed that I needed help and he reached out. He was the person for sure. Not only that, but I really admired his lifestyle. I admired his, morals, his, the way he respected other people and was just a very fair person. So it was definitely him that got me in the door.
Oh man, I can't believe I named him. And then there you go.
Yeah.
That's your mentor.
He's a common factor among young guys and girls that have, went this route in life, especially from this area.
Yes, definitely. So let's talk your time in FFA. I went through middle school and both high school. What about you? And what did you participate in your time in the Blue Jacket?
Well, it was money that got me started. The sixth grade, I showed an animal my sixth grade year to try to raise some money. That kind of opened the door. From there, I think Mr. Mills talked me into doing an opening and closing ceremonies team. It's been so long ago, I don't remember that clearly, but I just know that the more I applied myself, the more I kind of valued myself. I saw, like that personal gains and personal growth. I was a very shy young man. So the more I hung out with these people, the more they stretched me. And I didn't like it at the time, but even back then I had the wisdom to know that that's what I needed. Um, so yeah, I had sixth grade and high school, or excuse me, middle school and high school. Not everybody gets to be in FFA as a middle schooler, but that is a really unique opportunity for those who can. Um, all the CDEs are easier, obviously, and you can get all the emotional drama of being an officer and all the stuff out of your system by the time you get to high school. Then you can really take advantage.
Yeah, I did not get to have, I was in a very small school in Ohio, so we did not have middle school FFA. And I'm always jealous of the people who did, kind of, because I'm like, man, that would have been fun to be able to get into that much earlier. So you were this shy kid, a little more timid, and it seems like you got like told to come to that first ceremony in sixth grade. But how did that lead to then you being an FFA state officer? There must have been a lot of growth there.
Okeechobee had set quite the example. We had a banquet recently for all the past state officers, and there was about, I really hope I'm not exaggerating, it felt like there was about 18 people there. Maybe it was closer to 12 or a dozen. I don't remember specifically, but they had really set the bar high and made a pathway for us to go in. Some chapters don't have that pathway. You'll notice that some chapters, they struggle to get their foot in the door, and then when they finally do, the floodgates open, and then they'll have 4 or 5 state officers, sometimes in a row. Okeechobee had done that for me, so I had a lot of people to look up to. Valerie McKee was a year before me. She really helped me with my campaign. I remember Nathan Candler was a state officer. The people that I hung out with, they were very passionate about FFA, so I got to share in that. I was one of the few people who went on to be an ag teacher, though. That was something that I wanted to do in sixth grade when I met Mr. Mills. And then as time went on, I tried to talk myself out of it. I came full circle back to it. It had a lot to do with pay when I graduated. I did not know that teachers did not get paid that well. But when I found out, I took a couple of other industry jobs. And then eventually a school district here in South Florida decided to pay teachers really well. And I applied and I got it. It's hard, but I made the cut.
Absolutely. No, I think we've all gone through that process where there's those awesome, amazing chapters, and Okeechobee's definitely one. They're trailblazers to come from a chapter like that. Kind of envy it, definitely. Those kids were awesome throughout my entire time in FFA, and as far as state officers go, most impressive people. And for me, I mean, I've looked up to so many of them. But as far as the ag teacher thing, circling back to it and coming into the University of Florida, I believe, go Gators. Talk about that experience and working into your future career when you finally got into those classes. Was it like an aha moment, this is what I'm supposed to do for the rest of my life, or was it still an unsure path?
Well, I kind of pulled a fast one on the University of Florida, and when they found out about it, they were a little offended. But the major that I studied was ag education and communication. But when you take that, you have to specify which pathway you want if you're going to do education or communication. It's hard to believe that the 20-year-old version of me or the 19-year-old version of me had this kind of wisdom, but because I was a hellion at some times. But anyway, I had the foresight to know that basically anybody could be a teacher. If you had a degree, you could find your way into an education job. So I chose communication because it was easier. At the time, I was very well practiced, very well spoken. I'm a little rusty now, and my style has changed because now I talk to students as an authority figure instead of an inspirational figure. But I took the communication route, and so that I took that hoping that being a teacher would work out and wanting to do it. And then finally, one of my guidance counselors found out that I wanted to be a teacher, and she said, "Why didn't you take the communication route?" And I said, "Well, I knew that I could become a teacher with this degree, that my skills were more transferable with a communication degree, and that I probably didn't want to lock in everything and all this time and effort into one degree where I can basically only be a teacher." And she didn't, she respected that I was that smart, but she was a little offended that I did that. Fast forward, the joke's on me because now I don't have my teacher certification, which I'm actually working on actively. But I really could have used some of those education courses, especially with how strenuous people are. I know Glades County School District is a small district, but there are some professional people there. I've had some principals that really hold your feet to the fire. And that whole time in college, I kind of knew I wanted to be a teacher. It wasn't until later that I found out how little they get paid and how high the cost of living in Florida was at the time. My time at UF was life changing. I mean, I know everybody thinks that being a state officer is a huge deal, and it is. Um, we both know that can go either way, but the University of Florida was a decision that I made, and that it wasn't a gamble as long as I worked hard and got in. And I'm very happy that I did that. The amount of respect that I get from people in the education world um, that are ag related is very reassuring. Um, I don't know that either of you have ever been in education or specifically been an ag teacher, but in today's world, at an actual school itself, the ag teachers, the PE coaches, the nursing instructor, the business teacher, the shop teacher, carpentry, auto mechanics, they don't get treated like real teachers. They get treated like a babysitter. And I'm dealing with a little bit of that currently. And that's just a bias that's unfortunate because um, I've been thinking about this a lot. I guess this is a great place to insert this, but the sad thing is our current education system and a lot of teachers that are core classes, they don't appreciate the application of what we do in the classroom. Last week we did a geometry problem because we were working on a metal frame, and the geometry teacher at my school thinks I'm a maintenance man, so that was interesting to be in a classroom, know that I'm applying everything she's teaching those students, but also not have her respect, which is unfortunate, but I'm working on that and I just try to remain positive. But the good news is the students appreciate it. Um, I know the reason that I failed miserably at math in high school was because I could not understand how to apply it in a real scenario. And so I actually was at a Bible study recently, and an 80-year-old man said something to those along those lines, where he said, "I just never could appreciate it because there was no real world application for it. I wish somebody had showed me." And I'm a 33-year-old man at a group full of like 70 and 80-year-old men, so I didn't really want to chime in and say, "Yeah, I do that." In my mind, that was the affirmation that I needed to keep pushing forward with this battle.
Yeah, we actually talked to another FFA advisor not very long, like a few episodes ago. I don't know when in the realm of the episodes going up it'll be posted, how close they'll be together, but that was actually something we really honed in on, was the fact that I don't know if a lot of other teachers realize how much the ag like educator really takes on, because you're not just teaching a normal curriculum where you have to have your set plan and your, I don't know if it's semesters or 9 weeks, however you guys are set up down there, but you have to have your year plan of what you're going to teach these kids. But you're also a coach, so you're whatever CDEs or different contests you have going on, you're coaching those kids in all those different classes. And I mean, most FFA kids end up living in the FFA advisor's office too. So then you kind of are, that's the only time I'll take you are kind of babysitting, because I feel like a lot of times you end up you have FFA kids in your room that you're like having to kick out at some point to be like, get the heck out. Okay, this is too much. But I will say, in the beginning, when you were talking, to circle back just a little bit, it was kind of crazy, just the difference of I don't know if you would call it supply and demand, or the amount of teachers needed, because there was a lot of kids when I graduated from high school that, they were like, I want to be an FFA advisor. And it's actually, I went to a local private school that's more ag related and here in Ohio, and they actually really were blunt with us from the beginning of like, hey, so let's think about job opportunities. Every school in your county has only one FFA teacher, and they're there until they retire. So you actually, it's kind of silly for you to get into it. So they were pushing for what you did, that your college was like, hey, how'd you get this loophole? They were pushing for us to not settle into only education, that way that we weren't just boxed in, but to do something more broad like communications, because so many of us wanted to be FFA advisors and ag teachers, but there was like 2 availabilities. Like It was literally like there was going to be 100 kids fighting for 2 options, because I went to a small school. It only had 1 FFA advisor. Even the biggest school in our county, I think, only has 2. So we have we're very rural, but we're just so rural that we just don't have enough people. But to circle that back all around, what was the transition for you going from being being the kid being advised and going to the competitions and all that, to then being the one that was the coach?
Well, it was a lot of pressure, and I stumbled a lot. Some of that was the timeline. Most of it was just being brand new to the system, being put in those situations. That's a totally different ball game, and that's not one that you walk into and like are great at it, unless you're just an exception. Um, I'm going on 5 years now, and I still feel like a copy, like a Xerox copy. Like if you scan a document and it comes out a little bit more faded, I feel like a copy of a copy of a copy sometimes of my ag teacher. But slowly over time, I'm getting a handle on it. I'm starting to see gains. I'm making better decisions for my students. Um, I will say this too. It is extremely hard. And how do you say this without discrediting other generations or offending them? It's hard right now. These kids are tough. I'm competing with, I don't have to even explain to you what all I'm competing with, but somehow we still make it happen. There's authentic teachers out there, people who care. And, you don't really have to be um, of a teacher mindset to try and have an impact on these students. So as much as I hate to admit this, the bar is kind of low right now. So it's easy to meet or exceed expectations and changing a student's life or perspective on school. But you have to get creative. That was not the mindset as a student. As a student, I just applied myself. And if I applied myself and worked hard, I got the gains I was looking for. Now I feel like I'm putting together a puzzle, and I get a new principal every 18 months on average. There's a super high turnover rate in teachers, and the environment's constantly changing. And I told a principal this recently. I said, when are our students going to get off the roller coaster? I started teaching the year we came back from COVID. So I never got the experience of being a teacher before COVID and then that mess, fortunately. But still, when they came back, I didn't want to be there. Um, we've had 5 different principals in less than 5 years, and the leadership roles and the expectations are always rapidly changing. And so I think, I don't know about everybody else. I would assume there's probably other people in my shoes, but my students at my school right now at this time, they need stability. They don't have it at home. Um, then again, I'm also a human being and I have issues too, but um, it's just been, the question was, what's it like changing from a student to a teacher? Well, there's a lot more responsibility and you have to find a way to manage it. And that's pretty much the bottom line.
I was the student, and maybe one day I'll be the teacher. But I can see this, and me and my ag teacher were close, still are extremely close after her career switch this year. And I can see that teachers definitely don't get the credit they deserve. I definitely did not say thank you enough for the things they did for me. And that landscape is changing. Huge. My mom talks about her time in school, and then my brother's time in school and my time in school. They're all completely different on the way students learn, the way students want to be involved in things. I'm a hands-on kid. I want to be in it. I want to touch. I want to feel. I want to know all the different parts and ask you a million different questions. I'm probably the biggest headache of a student. But then you get students that might be falling asleep the whole time and you're like, dang, wake up. This is interesting. And I know as a teacher that has to be frustrating for you. But I can say one of my most favorite things is seeing Moore Haven FFA's Facebook post, because you guys do the coolest things in class. And like when you do cleanup days, or I know you guys were processing a hog at some point, and your classes are very hands-on, which is something, yes, we had hands-on in Fort Pierce, but not direct to ag careers, if that makes sense. It was more in the barn. And I was even a little jealous. So a day in your program, hands-on, the moments you love most as a teacher. Talk about that.
Well, being a teacher can be rewarding, obviously, but being an ag teacher specifically, you can see rewards very quickly, especially when a student grasps it. You get to see it. You don't just get to hear about it or speculate about how their, life is going later when you bump into them at Walmart. But before we move on to this, what you said you follow our Facebook page. Is that where you gather most of that stuff?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know that I could get away with that in my hometown of Okeechobee, Florida. I live in Okeechobee and I drive to Moore Haven every day for work. And I don't know
Crazy.
that Okeechobee County Schools would let me hang a hog from a tractor and let my students hold a pocket knife and skin it out. And I really want, if you haven't listened to a single thing during this podcast and you're a teacher, I really hope you take note on this. Stop asking permission. You've got to quit asking your principal what you can and can't do. I have not asked my principal if I could do any of those things. But the general consensus is, wow, look at this guy. He's going the extra mile. Everybody's so happy and so proud. But I guarantee you, those same people who are sharing my posts on Facebook, if I went into their office and said, hey, Mr. Thomas or Mr. Bickle, or I could name 3 other names, but hey, do you mind if I do this? Say, oh, let me get back to you. I'll, talk to you. And I never hear from them again. Or they might just say, no, that's crazy. What are you thinking? But I have not asked permission in 4 years. We're doing some incredible things down there. And that's all due to the fact that we just are, putting a higher value on the hands-on stuff. I've got a lot of students that claim they're not learning a thing. And that's, I used to be offended by that. But that's not true. I can see them learning it, and it's actually easier to give them a task and let them work it out. And they may struggle at first. And sometimes I intentionally let them struggle. And then after, if they struggle long enough, sometimes they discover the answer on their own. That's rewarding when you see them figure it out. And then it's also rewarding even when they don't figure out a situation, like a hard situation, a project that may put them on. Like, okay, you know how to weld. You can weld lines on a pad in the welding booth, but can you make a gate that's custom for that gap right there? And so they may know how the saw operates, but they don't have the knowledge to think ahead that if they cut it a certain way, maybe it won't work out. Now the whole project is scrapped and we have to start over. Um, I can't tell you how many times I've cringed at super expensive materials that I have known were going to be wasted after I had to, because there's nothing in Moore Haven. I have to drive all the way to Okeechobee to pick up materials, and it's been a struggle, but I've learned to let them fail. It's way more rewarding to see them fix it and make the most of it. And those students that claim they're not learning anything, it's because they're not used to this style. If they'll do an activity with me, and if I don't have to sit there and break it down and give them a 3-day lecture on it, if they'll just trust me and do the activity with me, we can talk about it later, and then they've already lived it. And now they can relate specifically to the things I'm talking about. As where when you try to tell them about it first, then their eyes gloss over and they don't really want to be there. And then now we're in the situation that we've talked about all week and we don't remember or we can't relate to it. So I kind of do it in reverse order. I've been told that some students, they need to reverse engineer something to be able to complete the task. They need to see it complete and then broken down. And then I've heard that there's students that need to see it drawn out and then do step by step. But I can't cater to them all, but I like my style because it's very realistic. When they get a job, if they get a job, which I'm praying they get a job, a lot of these kids, I don't know, we can't keep track of all of them once they leave. But if they get a job, being in my class was just like working for a foreman or being on a job site or being part of a crew or a team of people. It's very realistic. They just don't know it yet. So even when students don't get it, or even when they make comments that previously would have offended me or hurt my feelings, I'm actually okay. I know that this is what they're going to see because I've already lived it. I might only be 33 years old, but I've worked some crappy jobs. I'd like to think that I'm preparing them for some of those.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I always make the comment on here when we're talking to students a lot of times that I'm like, man, you can always just tell an FFA kid because of usually the way they present themselves. They're usually a lot better at speaking and being able to get across what they're trying to say. And as somebody who's now older, I see a lot of that value that the FFA holds. And so I definitely could see where you're coming from as the advisor being like, listen, you might not like this, but this is going to be so much better for you in the long run. Or like, this
Yeah.
is going to help you get that job or help you keep the job because you have already had somebody kind of holding you accountable. What's one project that you do in your program that you're especially proud of? Like, what's the one thing you're like, that's probably my favorite thing I've done with these kids?
Actually, I have a good one. So in addition to being a teacher, one of my passions is like wildlife management, hunting, fishing. Everybody says wildlife management. We just like to hunt and fish, and we try to do what's best. Make good decisions for the future. But one of the projects we just finished, I really wish I had like a picture or something I could show you. But we put a image of a real Florida deer up on the projector, the old school type of projector. Everybody's on smart panels now or some kind of a TV monitor. You can't press a pencil against the screen of a TV. But we put it up old school on the wall, and I did a couple of hogs too. And we had the students draw and outline the image of a deer, a Florida deer specifically. I didn't want to make some Illinois, or you said you're from Ohio. Ohio deer look a lot different, but we did a Florida deer, projected it on the wall. They traced it out. Students got to learn how to use a jigsaw. They made all these intricate cuts, and I walked them through it. They're actually really good at it. And once we did that, I had them paint the deer like as if it were a real deer. This is where that Moore Haven small town thing comes into play. It was how I advertised it, but basically we hung a target off of the front, a steel plate target. And when we were all said and done, we basically created a plywood deer target for youth so that when they shoot this target, they're getting used to seeing a deer. They're getting the feel of shooting at the image of a deer. They're hitting a steel plate. If they hit the plate, they'll get an instant report. They'll hear a ding. But if they miss, they'll hit plywood and they won't hear anything. I know a lot of people probably wouldn't be impressed by that, but that was something that, we have a lot of kids that like to hunt and fish down here. And they might only see 3 or 4 deer in their lifetime in the wild down here because it's just not as plentiful. But I had a few people buy those from my students, and they said that the 8, 9-year-old kid that they were taking out target practicing, it really helped them overcome the fear of like buck fever and got them more passionate about and ready to face that difficult situation. If you've never been hunting and you see a big deer, that's a difficult situation. That's probably just as difficult as having to stand up and speak to a room full of people. But that was, I don't know how impressed that other people would be by that, but I was proud of my students, the way that they did it. And they turned out very nice. And apparently it's making the difference that we hope for with young kids that like to hunt.
Oh my God.
That's such a cool project.
Yeah.
Like, I'm jealous.
Yeah,
this is such a cool project.
Well, I had to be careful how I advertised it. No. Oh, no.
I've hit 2 deer just driving, not even trying.
Yeah.
Lazy.
Dude, you don't understand. Ohio, they're everywhere.
You're really opening.
They bed down on my. I actually had to. Deer are giving my cattle sickness, and I actually can get a nuisance order to where I can just clear out as many deer as I want on my property.
Do you need help with that?
James wants to travel. So does Paige.
Like hearing the idea that you don't even see deer, I'm like, oh my God, I don't love the idea of not. I just hate hitting them with vehicles because yes, I have hit 2 deer, and that is like the most common thing probably people hit in Ohio because they are.
Well, they're so rare. They're so rare down here. If we hit one with our own vehicle, we'll pick it up and put it in the back of the truck.
Oh no, people still do that up here. Don't you worry. People still do that up here. But yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I remember, kind of like you were saying, the buck fever. Oh, I'm the worst. I love to go deer hunting. I love spending time in the woods. I can be a girly girl, but I can be all in it. Whatever works for me, And one of the biggest deer I ever shot, a Florida deer, I remember standing there just shaking. And my uncle was like, you got to prop up on the tree. Like, come on, sister, He's coming to you. You got to prop up on the tree. And I'm doing it. And I'm shaking. And I'm shaking. And I'm shaking. And he turns around and looks at me. And then I had to text his heart shot in. Great. I mean, he's on my wall at home. I'm super proud of it. But it's one of my favorite Buck stories. Like, yeah, my biggest deer, Texas heart shot. Paige couldn't prop up on a tree because she's shaking so hard. That doesn't have to go in the podcast, but I thought you'd enjoy that.
Leave it in. Leave it in.
Well, anyway, back to what we're supposed to be talking about. If you're a student listening into the podcast right now, James, what's something you would tell them? What's your final piece of advice for a student listening in, or maybe even an educator? You can take that route too. What's something that you've gained as your time in the classroom that you think others might benefit from?
Well, it hadn't been that long ago. I remember this weird childish animosity, this insecurity, this pressure of trying to fit in, this weird feeling of needing friends. And if I could speak to the young people, which I don't know how many will be listening to me, but I would say let all that go. That's not what it's all about. What it's really about is how you treat each other and basically storing up for the future. You know, you're young now and you can certainly enjoy it, but if you make good decisions now, you'll be in the habit of it later. And you don't need friends as bad as you think you do. And I can speak to that on a personal level. I've wanted friends and felt like I needed friends so badly that it got me in trouble running with the wrong crowd. And I hope that if you can take one piece of advice from me, that you focus on what's important and don't be too hard on yourself.
Well, thank you for coming on the podcast today. And that is such valuable advice. I definitely know now in college, I kind of feel the strains of that as well, finding out who your friends are, just like that song, one of my favorites. But thank you for coming on the show today. Thank you for reminding us what it's like to be in the classroom from a very hands-on perspective with an awesome ag teacher. It was great to learn from you and see some of the projects your students get to work on. As far as our listeners go, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this episode of Beyond the Jacket, and we'll see you next week.